Séamus.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Hi, everybody. We're live. A minute ahead of schedule. Sorry for anybody who was counting on us starting at exactly at 8 o'clock. My apologies. I'll do better next time. Séamus, returning champion Séamus Malekafzali is here to talk with me. Danny is unfortunately sick, so he will not be able to make the live stream tonight. But Séamus and I should have plenty to talk about here because maybe Israel and Turkey are going to go to war with each other. So that's what we're going to talk about. Maybe. He's written a piece about it at his newsletter, SéamusMalekafzali.com. We'll have a link to it in the notes to this live stream. But The Coming Israeli War with Turkey is the title. It is based in part on the airstrike that Israel just carried out on the Abu Duhur air base in northern Syria. So, Séamus, first of all, thanks for doing the live stream. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. What's going on here? Give us the basic lay of the land here. Like what are we looking at in terms of Israel and Turkey potentially coming to blows?
Well, there had been numerous strikes by Israel on Syrian military bases over the past year. This was something that really started substantially in 2025, where they were no longer attempting to get weapons out of the hands of the new Syrian government. They had destroyed somewhere between 70 to 80% of Syria's military capabilities when Assad fell. But now those individual strikes were intended as messages toward the Turkish military, where they were doing survey missions. They were working with their Syrian counterparts to potentially redevelop bases to allow for the redeployment of Turkish troops at these bases to fill security vacuums. And during most of these instances, they have either been preempted or they have been followed by Israeli airstrikes on those positions. This was the first one in a while, though. The last one was, I think, in late 2025. This one, it was also followed by a direct message from the Prime Minister's office where they were very clear that this was about the idea that Turkey could be militarily encroaching on Israel and that there is a status quo that Syria had ostensibly agreed to, and it was being violated by Turkey. There was a podcast appearance that Netanyahu had also did the following day, where he talked about this as specifically that kind of message, and it's becoming something that is now discussed at the very highest level of the Israeli military and the Israeli leadership.
Right. I want to talk about that, but I think what's interesting about this is the response from the U.S. The Trump administration has been not hugely thrilled with Israeli strikes on Syria since the fall of the Assad government. But this time around really seems to have irked some people in the Trump administration. Tom Barak, who is the U.S. ambassador to Turkey / special envoy for Syria, I believe was the first person to say that this was an Israeli airstrike. I mean, on some level, like who else could it have been, right? But like the Israelis themselves had not acknowledged carrying out the strike, and it was Barak who was the first person to say something with a tone, I think, of some irritation. I mean, he talked about how risky this was since it's so close to Turkey. It could have been misinterpreted by the Turks as potentially an airstrike that was heading for Turkey. He said that the Israelis hadn't given any notice and talked about setting up some kind of deconfliction mechanism. What do you make of this? I mean, obviously the Trump administration wants to cultivate this Syrian government. But how far do you think the irritation goes? Because, of course, they're irritated with Israel on so many fronts that don't really wind up mattering at the end of the day. The policy stays the same.
Exactly. I mean, Tom Barak, in his myriad different positions, I mean, as you said, ambassador, envoy, also in charge in some respects of previous negotiations with Lebanon, some positions in Iraq. because he is that kind of catch-all guy, he has a kind of catch-all objective, and it is to get governments completely on the side of the Americans. And Syria has gone far and above every other government in attempting to fulfill that want. I mean, the Syrians have gone out of their way to try to present themselves as a non-threat to Israel. Every single thing that you could possibly fathom, they've tried to do. They have not been firing at Israel despite the demands from certain Syrians inside the state, though it's not a very popular position. And he was obviously very angry about the idea that this relationship, this economic relationship and political relationship that is being built up with the new administration in Syria, that's being undermined by an ostensible American ally. But despite that consternation, nothing was done in regards to the initial Syrian invasion. There was no attempt made to put pressure on Israel to move back from its positions that they now hold in Quneitra province. There was absolutely no real significant attempt to cull the attempts to fund Druze separatists in the south. All of Israel's imperial ambitions in Syria continue to remain unfettered. And this deconfliction mechanism that they're talking about, like, I would assume that it's to alert people to the existence of Israeli strikes that are incoming to their position, in the same way that a similar one was projected to exist in Lebanon. But is that actually going to stop Israel from doing any of these things? Like, that has never been put on the table. I mean, we talk about being frustrated with Israel's actions in Gaza or wherever at the current moment, but there is never any actual significant action in that regard, right? They find different ways of getting around it. They get to loopholes. It never ends.
And I think it may be helpful to talk a bit, as you do in your piece, about the extent to which Ahmed Ashara's government, the current president of Syria, has sort of bent over backwards to demonstrate to the Israelis that there's no threat here, only to be met with, as you said, the Israeli occupation of big parts of Quneitra, the other half or the other remaining portions of the Golan, with no sign that the Israelis or the Israeli military is ever going to leave that position. Potentially, trying to arm or support Druze militants in the south. Whatever your take on the merits of that conflict or the details of it, it's still Israeli interference. This demand that all of southern Syria be turned into a demilitarized zone, effectively giving over, the security of that region to this Israeli demand. What is in response, or in the meantime, what has the Syrian government been doing to sort of try to convince the Israelis that there's no threat here?
Well, I mean, they haven't exactly been pulling troops out from the south, as Israel has recommended. I mean, they've been professionalizing their forces, professionalizing being, in big air quotes. A lot of these units that were these individual rebel groups got just simply upgraded into being conventional army units. Internal security that the Syria deployed following the most severe stage of the conflict with these different Druze groups. That is also a very bare bones formalization, that organization. I mean, after these strikes happened, the foreign minister spoke directly with favorite Israeli journalist Barak Ravid and communicated again that this is, Syria is not interested in conflict with Israel, that this is not, even denying the fact that Turkey was attempting to deploy to these bases, which I don't believe. That's been the stated policy for months and months now. But clearly they are attempting to at least portray that they are not interested with any kind of future confrontation with Israel on any level. It does, but again, as we said, it's not working, because what Israel wants is not ambivalence or even complicity. They want total subjugation. They want every Syrian military capability, any ability to project power outside its
Right.
borders, to end. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that like this effort now to say, well, there's never going to be any Turkish military presence at Abu Duhur. There's not going to be any Turkish military. Like this flies in the face of a lot of discussions that seem to be taking place between the Syrian government and Turkey, and the relationship that goes back to the middle of the Syrian civil war. It also, I mean, I think it is, has been determined, or was reported, that the Turks had been working on renovating Abu Duhur, which has been, mostly fallow for quite some time. It sort of defies belief that they would be working on this base without some intention to have some presence there. I mean, maybe not a full garrison or anything like that, but something. And yet, like, even if you assume that there's an intention to base Turkish military forces in Syria, at some facility somewhere, it's not clear why the Israeli government should have a veto over that, right? Like the Syrian government should be allowed to determine whether or not it invites foreign military forces onto its soil. And the implication here, and maybe we can get into some of these discussions that you've talked about that are happening within Israeli politics. The implication is not just that Israel should have a veto over foreign policy decisions that the Syrian government makes, but that Turkey in particular is this existential threat now to Israel, which is, within the confines of the never-ending war that Benjamin Netanyahu has now started, where, first it's Hamas, then it's Hezbollah, then it's Iran. Now we need something else to fight, and I guess it's Turkey, or at least, a lot of people are in Israel are suggesting that it might be Turkey. So talk about that context.
Well, I mean, Turkey is like the last major Muslim power that has sovereignty over its own borders. I mean, Egypt, Jonathan Pollard, in that brief time that he was running for the Knesset, he had talked about Egypt being the obvious next threat. And I'm sure Amichai Yallahu, people who have talked about reoccupying the Sinai, they're also thinking about it. But Egypt's military, it is a threat in the sense that it is a large country with certain Western technologies, but it pales in comparison to the kind of military that Iran has and the kind of military that Turkey has.
And the U.S. pays it to be Israel's friend. So I mean,
Yes.
how realistic is that? Yeah.
No, but also, I mean, even before, like the first meeting that happened between Netanyahu and Erdogan happened, maybe 2 weeks, not even, before October 7th. Like there had been these attempts at normalization, and Turkey really did not have a strong maintained interest in completely shutting off Israel up until it became,
Right.
Obviously very bad PR for them. But even then, throughout bad PR, they maintained certain economic interests, and there is not a real desire to get into a military confrontation with the Israeli state, because unlike Iran, which has despite the fact that, of course, it gets supplies from other countries, it has created a very strong indigenous military manufacturing network. Turkey has a lot of native-made advanced weapon systems, ones that can easily work with other Western technologies. And there were concerns by Israel that the stealth fighters that are supposed to be entering Turkey's arsenal in 2029, ones they've made themselves, could be on par with Israel's, in addition to the objections they've obviously had with them getting the F-35. Objections which were also interestingly voiced about the UAE getting the F-35, at least in very small ways. But Turkey knows that they have weaknesses within their supply lines. The fact that they are still reliant on Western technology, Western imports in order to fund their military, in order to supply their military, to keep it functioning. And this prevents them from actually doing what Erdogan will occasionally angle at wanting to do. Like, yeah, maybe we'll intervene on behalf of the Palestinians, or maybe we'll do something if we get pushed to it. But there is no serious discussion happening, unlike in the Iranian parliament every single day, that they are going to need to go to war with Israel. But Israel is convinced that this is something that needs to happen immediately. or as close to immediately as possible, because otherwise it's going to become too. I mean, what was the thing that they said about, or at least Marco Rubio said about Iran, that eventually it'd have a conventional military shield around it, that it could never be penetrated.
Yeah,
And they're
something
saying
like that.
similar things with Turkey, that it's a Muslim Brotherhood state that has a nuclear program of its own, and eventually it's going to get to the point where it can't be countered by Israel. What are we going to do by that point? You've got to be able to take out the start. We can't have October 7th again, yada, 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 ad infinitum. It's not as well developed as the stuff with Iran or Hamas or Hezbollah or anything, but it's certainly there, and it's certainly well based.
Well, and I think, I mean, I would argue this is part of the psychosis that has gripped the politics of Israel, and with an election approaching, Netanyahu in particular needs to continue fighting something, or else people start to ask uncomfortable questions like, how did you let October 7th happen, or why haven't we actually won any of these wars that you've been starting? And he doesn't want that. So the best thing to do, and polling already isn't in his favor at this point, so the best thing for him to do, I think, is just keep fighting, and you need to keep finding new threats, new existential threats to say, I mean, his whole electoral pitch at this point is, I'm the only guy who can protect Israel from all these threats, and Turkey is the logical next one, I guess, for the reasons that you've articulated. It's questionable to me. I mean, Erdogan, like Donald Trump, Erdogan says a lot of stuff. Like, he talks a lot.
I'm
doesn't always do.
Like, he always seems to be in a situation where he's giving a speech like every single day, like a different.
Yeah, he's either talking to like Parliament,
yeah,
or he's giving a speech that's on television, or he's talking to his party. He does that a lot, like just talks to the AKP members of Parliament. But yeah, there's always some reason for him to be giving speeches. And he says, I mean, he does say things like, maybe we'll intervene in Gaza. I don't think he has any intention of doing any of these things. He didn't even stop, when he was talking about like cutting Israel off. Turkey was still serving as a conduit for oil coming from Azerbaijan to get to Israel all throughout. It has been serving as that throughout the genocide. Like, I think it's all talk. It basically is what I'm saying. Like, there's no meat there, and yet the state of Israeli politics is such that this has to be, like, there has to be an existential threat, and this is the one that they're on now.
I mean, Turkey, like, it wants to have its own independent foreign policy. It recognizes the fact that it is extremely geographically well placed in the world. It maintains an extremely strong army, and it doesn't have to go along with every single NATO precept that maybe Montenegro might have to, or some other small European state like that. But it also knows where its bread is primarily buttered. It cannot cultivate an axis of its own around Erdogan, as much as the Turkish nationalists like to portray the country as this empire of its own still, this inheritor of the Ottoman legacy. And there is this continued reliance on NATO as this protector, that if it can still maintain these relationships, that it will be able to go on, and that it will be able to continue on as usual. And there is definitely indicators within, at the very least, Turkey's National Intelligence Agency, that this relationship may be fraying, or they're not prepared in the way that they probably should be. And there are certain people within the AK party who understand that this position is untenable, but they are not at a position where they are making any sort of real preparations in this regard. Like, when war was on the march with Iran, you could see it from space. Like, everything was very well telegraphed on both sides. Not saying that one was trying to instigate it more than the other, but clearly you could see where things were going. Whereas Turkey is very insistent that this is not a possibility that should be entertained, whereas one party is saying this absolutely needs to be a possibility that's being entertained. And until that becomes more equal, Turkey is going to continue down the same path that it is right now. And I'm unsure of what it can do to prepare in the way that it needs to.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some respects they've gone backwards from trying to stake out a more independent approach. That was clearly what the S-400 purchase was about. Like, we're not beholden to NATO, we're not beholden to the U.S. We can, cut a deal with Russia and buy their weapons if we want to. Like, we're our own thing. But they're still hanging on to this like F-35 obsession to the point where they're going to sell the S-400s to the UAE, I guess was the last rumor about that. Although the Russians may throw a wrench into the works there, I guess. But like, you would think at some point, if you really wanted to chart an independent foreign policy or an independent, approach, you would tell the U.S. to go piss up a rope. I don't want your F-35s, which aren't even that effective anyway. It
Well,
doesn't seem like. I mean, it's not
that's
worth it.
that's the thing. Like an Iranian air defense system, after like lots of them have been taken out, still managed to take down an F-35 to disable it. Like this is if that can do to that, other than the myriad problems it has, like
Right.
what on earth? No, and this is the issue with military thinking, right? It has Turkey perceives itself to be a genuinely strong military power because it has been able to invade Syria during the height of the civil war. It has been able to set up proxy armies. It has been able to exert its will inside of northern Iraq against all these different Kurdish groups. Obviously, its foreign policy goals won out in Syria beyond their wildest dreams. I mean, hundreds of thousands of refugees have been able to go back, and that problem is not as strong inside Turkey as it was in the 2010s. But it is not prepared to do things on its own. It doesn't want to do things on its own. It likes this idea of being able to get all these benefits from all of these different actors. But we are now in a position where it is going to have to make a decision about what it wants. And like there is no indication that they're getting there. No.
Right. Right. And so let's talk about what happens here. I mean, if if there is a conflict, and that it would have to be instigated by the Israelis, because as you said, there's no indication that Turkey is preparing even for a potential conflict here, let alone interested in starting one. Let's say the Israelis go to the extreme of carrying out an attack on Turkey, which brings into play the possibility of Turkey invoking Article 5 and insisting on collective defense. And at that point, I mean, I really feel like NATO as we know it would collapse, because the United States is not going to back Turkey over Israel. I don't think the major, like Germany, France, I wouldn't expect any of them to back Turkey over Israel. Even given all the frustration that some of the European governments have had with Israel over settlements, settlements is sort of the lowest hanging fruit, but over Gaza, I still don't envision that happening. So it would either they would either try to do some tepid, check off the box action to say we've fulfilled the requirements of Article 5 without really doing anything meaningful, which would presumably frustrate the Turks, or they would just outright say no, this is we're not going to help you out here, which is the death of NATO as we know it. Like what is your sense of how that would play out?
I mean, what bothers me is that, like, in reading a lot of Israeli media reports, analyses about what would happen if this kind of confrontation were to occur, like their analysis of how this consensus on Article 5, it reads completely accurately. Like they know, as you said, European countries are not going to want to back up Turkey on this, not only because of its independent foreign policy, not only because it's attempted to maintain its relationship with Russia while they're all coalescing around Ukraine, but it places itself against Western directions on foreign policy consistently. And it is a very aggravating thing that European states consistently have to deal with, in a way that Israel is obviously portraying itself as this arbiter of what is truly Western, what is truly belonging to Western civilization. And there's this understanding when you read these reports from like the Jerusalem Post. They know, or in Israel Hayom, if this were to happen in Syria, if this confrontation were to directly happen in Syria, we're not even talking about some sort of strike on Istanbul or another Turkish city in order to take out Hamas. Same argument, same play that they try to do in Qatar. If they do that in Syria, an argument could feasibly be made that this is not an attack on Turkish territory. This is not but this is not a war of aggression. This is self-defense because Turkey does this, and that with Hamas. And you saw the logic being preemptively endorsed by the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, when not only does he not engage with a question about this very possibility, he immediately connects things back to October 7th and the chain of events that emerged from there, that Israel was not the starter of that conflict. And therefore, you can assume, you could extrapolate, that if this were to occur, the same argument might be presented. I mean, Rutte may not be able to avoid the question in this way, but that is definitely the calculus that other European states are going to make. And it also does, to connect this to a different story that appeared in the Financial Times. I mean, you had read that report about Iran potentially targeting that base in Bulgaria that was being used for refueling flights, right?
Yes.
I'm imagining Iran thinking, if this is true, admittedly, that if they were to do that, that a similar gamble could be made, that America has done this catastrophic war. If Iran strikes back in this way, it may also cause this consensus disarray about whether or not they want to get involved in this. And it may result in European states breaking and not wanting to get involved, and that further isolates America. But that gamble, it could be made, but on Iran's part is
pales, in comparison.
No, Israel knows the kind of position it is in. These, the word that had been used by one of the Israeli think tanks was, mini-lateral alliances. It wants to be in a position where it can fragment NATO and then make new alliances, new security relationships where it can decide what the real threat is. And the real threat inevitably is going to be whatever it decides on any particular day.
So I think if people have questions, Danny's not here to insist on paid super chats. So if you just want to ask some questions in the comments, you'll have to forgive me if I miss them. It's the only thing, because it's hard to pick out sometimes in the stream of comments. But if anybody has questions they want to pose to Séamus, we can do that. We could also switch gears slightly, since you invoked Iran, and talk about what you think is happening here with the administration flailing for an answer to the war that had started, or a way to get out of it. Now this latest push for economic D-Day, or whatever the hell they're talking about, what Trump was talking about yesterday, and Scott Bessent said is going to be the most punishing economic measures ever taken against a country to isolate it. It just sounds like they're going to do more sanctions.
No, I mean,
I don't know what's left. I don't know what's left to do, I guess, is my question.
Weren't they doing this before? Am I crazy?
I mean, I think so. I mean, what's they're going to do
I know.
sanctions that punish other countries that do business with Iran. This is what we've been doing.
You are not going to cut off every single country that has ever done anything with Iran, right? They tried to do. It reminds me of the terror thing, because if you start doing this, you are cutting off relationships with countries that you absolutely need to. You are not on any planet going to say to China, after this fiasco you just went through, you might say it for a day, I'm not going to discount the possibility that some order comes down and then there's chaos. But this is not something that can be sustained in any particular way, because people are already we've somehow gotten into this crazy world where nothing affects the price of oil anymore. I don't know how long that can go on for, but when you start cutting off entire trade relationships with major manufacturing countries, not just China, but others, Like that's going to make people freak out. It's I don't know what they could do, but I can tell that Scott Bessent is kind of out of ideas here, as is Trump, as is every other official, because they can't do an invasion. They're not going to
Right.
do an invasion of the kind that would be required to topple like Saddam. They're not sending hundreds of thousands of people. They might do something stupid, but they're not going to do what they would need to do.
I even think if they were going to do something stupid like Carg Island, they would have done it by now. Like they clearly don't want to.
I just
And so you're left to with this like, just you wait, we're going to hit you with so many sanctions. And you're right. I mean, they're not going to tell China like, oh, you're cut off from the United States and cause Great Depression 2.0 over this. So I just don't know what's left to squeeze, like what juice is left to squeeze out of this.
And you can also
Uh,
tell that like the
this thing.
Iranians are really like they're kind of waiting for it. I don't know if you've been seeing like the stream. Like there was someone on state television a few days ago saying that like we dug 5,000 graves in the Iranian desert for American soldiers. I want to say high level general
Right.
was saying we'll pay you like
Yeah.
5,000 something dollars or 3,000 something dollars if you kill an American soldier and you can prove it, and we'll
I
take
did see the bounty thing. Yeah.
yeah, like they're rearing for this kind of thing to
I
happen.
mean, they're ready to go back to war, and they've been living under sanctions for they've been operating. That government's been operating under sanctions for how long now? And like it's one more round of sanctions is going to somehow be the death knell. I don't think so. But far be it for me to question whether Scott Bessent and Donald Trump actually know what they're doing, I guess. Um, we do have a couple questions here, Seamus, if you want to take them. I'm going to start with one from Uber Flesh. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but what is Turkey's relationship with China these days?
Ooh, I don't know if I could speak to this with any detail,
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure I can either because I'm not sure what it is. Like, there's the
I know that
occasional like tepid comments about the Uyghurs or something like that,
yeah,
but
that's the thing
uh,
is like the East
yeah,
Turkestan stuff
right,
is something that has been on the Turkish agenda for a very long time now. They maintain bilateral relationships. I mean, Chinese companies do invest in Turkey quite often. I don't think there's anything ideological there, if that's what the question is necessarily referring to. I don't think that they are going to do a. I remember Erdogan said when he was talking about Gaza, like they were going to do an operation in Nagorno Karabakh or
yeah,
Libya to do that. I don't think they're going to do
yeah.
that with Xinjiang. So
Yeah, something tells me they're not.
no, no, they know what battles to declare.
Yeah, yeah. We have another one. This was over on the Substack. How does this situation, the Israel Turkey situation, do you think relate to this new Islamic NATO or whatever they're trying to call it, the UAE or the Saudi, Pakistani, Turkish military alliance? Uh, is that? I mean, that's potentially something the Turks could invoke as well.
Mm.
Again, ask yourself if Saudi Arabia really wants to get involved
This
in that
is
conflict. But maybe, just to get your take on that alliance would be interesting, actually, even if there's no direct relationship to this uh, the Israel tension.
I'm sure it is a message in certain ways to Israel that they may have to deal with both Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Pakistan being a nuclear power, weaponized nuclear power. But like the Saudi Pakistan Defense Pact came before the war with Iran, and that
Right.
didn't do them any good at all. This is something that I think it feels like it's more about like not intended necessarily, primarily so, but it could be something that could be used as a pressure point against Iraq. I mean, obviously Turkey and Saudi Arabia, especially at the very current moment, have military concerns about what is happening in Iraq. And that is something that could put a damper on the Islamic resistance of Iraq's actions. Talking about Kurdish groups that are operating in there, et cetera. But I have never seen any sort of serious discussion that Pakistan is going to consider using its kind of arsenal against anyone other than India. That's never
Yeah.
entered any serious discussion. Saudi Arabia doesn't have those kinds of capabilities and certainly isn't going to go up against Israel. Like, I don't think I didn't include it in the article that I wrote because I didn't think it was even necessarily a serious thing. It's just something that has happened, but nobody is really considering it to be real in a NATO sense, where the threat.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been tested. You'd have to test it to see if it actually holds up.
Exactly.
In a crisis. And there was a lot of talk about, like, who is this directed at? Is it directed at Iran? Is it a message about, we're preparing for the US to leave, kind of pull out or pull down its forces in the region? We're trying to make some arrangements for that. Is it directed at Israel? I think there's some, like, some of this at least is directed at the UAE, and that's from the Saudi perspective. They don't get along. They're on opposite sides in a number of places. And it's going to be interesting, I think, to see if this alliance translates into relationships or sort of aligning policy in other areas, like Sudan, for example, where this week, the Saudis signed this cooperation agreement with the Sudanese military that may include paying for them to buy Turkish drones. So that's a place where they could take this on the road potentially, and it would have some impact. But yeah, I don't. It's still hard to see like how it's going to function. Is Pakistan going to be calling on the Saudis and the Turks to help it fight its next war with India? I don't know. Like, it really feels like Saudi Arabia buying a couple of friends. And as you said, they already had the alliance with Pakistan, and maybe they'll add Egypt. I don't know. But it feels like, the Saudis are probably going to drive this with their money. Yeah.
If it adds Egypt, I would start considering it to be like, okay, this is much more about Israel.
Okay.
And that makes Egypt enter into security conversations that would obviously start happening in Israel. But that, we're asking Sisi to do a lot there. To put something on the line that I don't think he'd be willing to put there just yet.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even really seen much comment, to my knowledge. Maybe you have from the Trump administration about this grouping, which are all countries that the U.S. is ostensibly on good terms with, and yet I'm not sure the relationship is comfortable for Washington.
No, never seen anything either. It doesn't seem to be. It's something that is of news in the Middle East, but the United States
hasn't really caught on.
Yeah.
So we got another question from Donbass Boomhauer. Do either of you buy that the Ukraine war was over Belt and Road and to a lesser extent continued hostility towards Iran? I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. Like,
over China or like trying to angle toward Iran. I would disagree. Stuff with Iran with Ukraine has came in, I think, primarily when they actually started getting drones into Russia and making that a central part of the war. I don't think it was really part of that from the side of the Europeans. Obviously, Iran from the beginning was viewing this as something that could potentially weaken the West.
Here's one. That's just a gibberish name, but is the EU still paying Turkey to absorb refugees? I don't think so. Are they? I honestly don't know if that program's still going on.
Well, because the end of this, I can at least respond more clearly to the second part of that about
the end of the Syrian civil war. Sure,
I think it ended. I think it definitely ended a lot of the leverage, not all of it, because Belarus was able to utilize refugees, a lot of them from Syria, but a lot of them also from Iraq to do what it attempted to do at the border, though that was still during the civil war, admittedly. But Syrian refugees have been able to go back home in ways that they were obviously not able to do before in wide droves. And I mean, I know that there are still, I don't know. I would say the leverage is definitely weakened. Maybe if it's not entirely absent.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the big driver. I mean, there were refugees from Afghanistan that were making it through Turkey to come to Europe, but really it was Syria that was driving so much of that. And now the focus is on, of course, the crossing the Mediterranean, the African migrants attempting to cross the Mediterranean or enter, Ceuta and Spanish territories. So, yeah, it feels like it's not that salient an issue at this point. Let's see. We had one over on Substack. What's your take on BRICS, Séamus? Is it a formidable trading threat to the U.S.?
Not a threat. BRICS has no. I'm sorry. I get the reposts from the BRICS.
You're gonna bum people out here, man.
Here's the thing. I love the idea of these multipolar stuff, but like BRICS doesn't do a whole lot. Like
it's incoherent. I mean, the membership is incoherent.
There's no ideological fabric to it, like NATO or the Warsaw Pact was. And people, I think, have talked to me about like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, under similar terms. And like the only way that these kinds of unions become actually confrontational to the West is if they either have currency, a unified currency, or they agree to defend each other in the event of a war. Anything that is not including these two things is entirely irrelevant to the process, which I hate to say. I would love for the opposite to be true, but that is the case, and these countries are not willing to do that at this time.
Right. I mean, in the absence of some ideology that links these countries together, you still have, even in the core membership, forget the expanded membership, which I think is even more incoherent.
Yeah,
it's their foreign policy aims. But even the core membership, you don't have a unified group of countries that is ready to tell the West to go spit. Is ready to tell the U.S. to
Brazil, Iran and the UAE in the same organization. Yeah, I forgot the UAE.
You're not gonna. So what did you make of that? Maybe we talked about, what Besson and Trump are doing, or at least talking about. The UAE made this announcement this week that they're cutting all commercial ties with Iran, ostensibly over a missile attack, which seems ridiculous because how many attacks have there been and they haven't pulled that trigger?
I had to map this out for a piece I've written. It was over 2,800 ballistic missile strikes.
There you go. So, I mean, it beggars belief that this last one, which may not have even been aimed at the UAE, they changed the story to say, they were attacking or they were shooting at ships offshore. Was this just the UAE trying to make an announcement to get out ahead of like Trump and Besson to some extent and say, yes, we're on board, we're going to punish Iran economically? Like, do you expect any actual change in that relationship? I mean, a lot of the commercial ties here were already basically illicit. I mean, under U.S. sanctions. So the imports that were coming into Iran from the UAE, or the money that was going out, was already being done on a covert basis to some extent, which I think could still easily continue no matter how many public pronouncements the Emiratis make.
No, I mean, Israel was able to survive in the way that it did, in this time of total isolation land-wise, because it was able to develop an indigenous, using that word in a very particular way, a society that could survive from the West, but also it could produce societal mobilization from within. It could have industries that could operate from within. And the UAE is entirely reliant on outside forces. It has conscription, but 12% of the population are citizens. And it is directly next to the country that it claims that it can't have any ties with. Like, this is the thing that has prevented previous attempts to disconnect from the country or support other countries against Iran. In that other Emirates they don't have oil wealth. They don't have anything resembling independent wealth. They are reliant on tourism. They are reliant on their economic relationships with other places like Dubai, primarily. It cannot afford to do this kind of thing long term. The UAE is going to come. I hate to use this phrase, but it's going to come crawling back here. It cannot survive without the economic relationships it has with Iran. Not long term, not medium term.
I mean, I feel the same way about, or similarly about this. I guess the leak this week to Barack Ravid was, we're doing covert tanker runs through the Strait of Hormuz every night. Like we've knocked out Iranian radar, and we're getting like some ridiculous number, 10 million barrels a day out of the Strait of Hormuz, which is about half of what they were doing before the war, which I don't believe for a second. But even if that's true, the amount of resources and the work that had to go into creating a situation where you could get away with that without drawing attacks from the Iranians. This is not a sustainable thing. Like it's they're bragging about this like we've solved the oil problem. The U.S. Navy can't even maintain like an aircraft carrier without serving gruel to the sailors on board. Like they can't keep that up long term. It's just ridiculous.
No, I mean Iran is having problems with imposing full sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, obviously. But it cannot, like the US cannot impose the final full sovereignty at once either. And the UAE is essentially under a naval blockade by the Iranians,
Right.
Like,
well, it's a U.S. territory now, Seamus. I don't know if you knew that. But Donald Trump.
I would love to know what the process is.
I think at this point he just posts about it.
Yeah,
and
I saw the
makes it
map,
law. Yeah.
and I thought, I didn't know it was that easy. We should have done this months ago. But.
Exactly, and other places, like why limited
Yeah.
So I have a lighter question here from Ian McBride. Do you have a fun or funny Iranian film recommendation for the weekend?
Oh God. I gotta be honest, I don't watch a lot of funny Iranian movies. They're really upsetting, kind of front to back. There was, I don't remember the title of this admittedly, but there was a very funny movie that I saw years ago. Oh, no, wait, what am I saying? See Pig. Pig is a great movie that came out about a serial killer that is targeting all of Iran's most famous directors, and a washed up director is very upset that he hasn't been killed yet. That's great.
That sounds like a good one. There you go.
That's a great movie. All the stars are there. All the stars.
All right. And here is there's a more serious one, and now I've lost it. Okay, no, I got it back from Raving Celt 009. Calling back to your previous writings on Sadat and his legacy, what's the likelihood of political dissent in Egypt forcing a break with Israel or the West?
Oh, that is a good question. I think things have to get much worse in Egypt beyond the question of Palestine and Israel for that to happen. I mean, Sisi, when he was building the new administrative capital, I don't know if they've settled on a new name for it quite yet, but that was at least the name they were going with for a while. Like, he had talked about it as needing to be built even if the Egyptians were to starve. And then he again, after the war broke out in Gaza, he said that, if Gazans are willing to starve, then Egyptians could starve as well. But that kind of thing hasn't happened yet, even if there is a massive economic crisis on the horizon. But I remember after October 7th, there were protests in the streets of Egypt where they were there were demonstrations where they were invoking Hassan Nasrallah. Like there is that opinion there. There has never, ever been a popular movement behind normalization with Israel. Throughout the decades, It's been the case. It has never been popular, even a little bit.
No, it's always been top down. Yeah.
Always been something that is just accepted as a political reality by the vast majority of people. But the last time that they attempted to have a president that aligned with the Egyptian population on this issue, Mohamed Morsi, he was not long for this.
Funny what happened there.
Golly. Like there are obviously certain other reasons for that, but Israel and his relationship with Gaza was part of that. That was part of the calculus by Western powers for why they supported the coup. And there has to be I hate saying that things need to get worse for things to get better, but in Egypt's case, there has been such political ossification post-Sisi in a way that under Mubarak it was bad, but now it's really bad. It's going to take a while, I think.
We got another one from Donbass Boomhauer again. Has Iran received Chinese air defenses, and do they really need them at this point? In many ways, I feel they've established deterrence to some extent, and the Sam Bush strategy seems to be effective. Yeah, this is regarding the manpad systems, basically the portable air defense systems that they're supposed to be getting from China. I honestly don't know if they've received any yet. I mean, this has been talked about. They're coming. They're on the way. They've been on the way for months now. So I don't know.
It's I would say that I don't know specifically about this this deal, but I would say that they do need them.
I would agree. Yeah.
Like as long as Israel and the United States are able to strike inside of Iranian territory, having I know that there are specific categories here, but having at least some degree of aerial superiority, that remains a problem. I would say like they are not at the time, they're not in the place that I think the Yemenis are, where they completely were able to deny aerial superiority to the Americans, constantly shooting down drones. And Iran has done a lot in this regard. I mean, the Reaper drones have been falling from the sky throughout all of this.
That was like a quarter of the Reaper fleet has been destroyed, I think, in this conflict. So, yeah.
But it's still not going to be enough to make it to establish that kind of deterrence that you're referring.
Right. Right, and I think they're in a place where it would be very interesting if the war started in earnest again. If the U.S. is really exhausted its stockpiles of standoff munitions to the point where it has to start flying manned aircraft into Iran and dropping bombs over targets instead of shooting missiles at them from a distance. Like these systems could come in very handy in that circumstance. Then, so I would agree that that they probably do need them.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they've gotten any of them yet.
No.
This is from Zahir Nurullah. Is Egypt still compelled by the IMF and World Bank to grow cotton instead of cereals? I don't know. You'll have to take this one.
I don't know. I did hear about this, so this is not coming from nowhere, but I do not know. Nevertheless, I feel like them building a gigantic city in the middle of the desert or to house all of the administration's officials, I feel like that's even stupider, and that's self.
This is like, there's got to be a better way to spend that money in Egypt, of all places.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of bad economic decisions have been made. Certainly, I can believe
it. We got one on Substack that you may have some insight on. Any good biographies of Mossadegh in English that you're aware of?
Yes, there is one. I don't remember the full title, but I had to use it for research several months ago. How you can identify it is the English transliteration is Mussaddiq. It's a strange transliteration of it, but it is incredibly extensive. All kinds of anecdotes have been pulled about Mossadegh's life, his emotions, lots of Persian language sources from his diaries and other people's diaries. Very extensive, but it's one of, I think, the only good resources in English about Mossadegh specifically.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I guess there are reasons why English language authors wouldn't want to write about Mossadegh, but yeah. So I'm gonna say one more question, and then we can call it a night. Back in this is from Zach Dillon 26. Back in 2021, there was talk about a resurgence of Hamas in the West Bank. Is that still happening, or did it wholly collapse? I would say the Israeli crackdown in the West Bank has stifled that, but I don't know what your interpretation is.
I mean, Hamas in the West Bank was never a kind of organized force in the way that it was in Gaza, for sure. I mean, there had been attempts at forging some sort of rocket launching capability. There was a video that was, I don't know if it was obtained necessarily by the Times of Israel, but they did publish one where it was someone with an Ibn al-Qassam Azzeddin al-Qassam brigade flag, and there was a tiny rocket that was being fired from the West Bank, but that was really all they had, despite the claims by Israel that they were on the verge of, being able to do the same thing that Gaza was able to do on October 7th.
Right.
But it was always very disconnected. It was always very informal, in contrast to the kinds of much more organized Palestinian Islamic Jihad units that were active in places like Jenin. But yes, the operations that were undertaken by the IDF, Operation Summer Camps, and I'm sure there was another name for one of the more recent ones, those have really destroyed the armed resistance groups in the West Bank. It really shattered their spines. In addition to demolishing these wide swathes of Palestinian towns, imposing direct IDF presence, and making it so that these tight corners that Palestinian militants were originally able to utilize against Israel, making these fundamentally impossible, imposing its will over the PA. And not only has that organization been shattered, the popularity of Hamas has also gone down in the West Bank. There is polling on this. At the height of the regional war, when Gaza was being bombarded to the utmost, there was a very large resurgence in the popularity of Hamas in the West Bank, to the point where it was more popular there than it was in Gaza. And after the war ground on and the prospects for Hamas winning a victory began to be lost, and Israel's position continued to entrench, that popularity began to wane as it became, I don't know what the word would possibly be, a lot of people started coming to the opinion that October 7th, regardless of whether or not it was preempting an IDF attack on, to destroy the resistance inside Gaza, that it may have been a mistake, that it wasn't strategically sound, that this war has caused so much devastation. It brought all this devastation to the West Bank specifically. I mean, you can hear these opinions from Palestinians, and it a lot of like the broad emotion that seems to be expressed is malaise, frustration, anger, depression, that all of these different horizons have been shortened by what Israel has done to these places. So that, wide net being, but the resurgence that was being predicted was cut down by the IDF.
So Séamus, I'm going to keep, if you're all right, I'm going to keep you for another minute and call an audible here, because we did have somebody pay to ask a question, which again was not necessary, but Bug Tank, and it's a light one. It's a good one to end on.
Okay.
What video games are you playing?
Okay. I only play.
I will say I started playing the original Red Dead Redemption, and I have had just lost track of it. Like I really love that game, and I was going to play that and then play RDR2 again, and I've just lost my ability to focus on video games or have any time to play them. So I'm stuck on that.
That's a great game. I would say that I only play 3 video games consistently, and I just keep cycling between them. Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4, and Cyberpunk 2077. Those
Nice.
are the only 3 games that I play to any degree.
I loved New Vegas. I played it and got right up to the point where, but it was very buggy. I remember it was very buggy, and it's still buggy. Okay, because I remember playing it. I played through all of the downloadable content. I played through everything, and I was saving the last mission, and I got onto the dam, and I'm fighting the Caesar's legions, and it crashed, and my whole save was corrupted, and I couldn't get it back. And I was just so fucking furious that I said, and there we go. That's our first.
Your computer couldn't handle all of the different elements on screen.
I was just I can't play this whole thing again and get.
But no, it's great to play it all the way over again. You can make new decisions.
I do have it. I mean, I would definitely do that. But it was so frustrating. I remember at the time, it just drove me nuts.
Sure.
So yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm going to call it there. That was a good way to end on sort of a lighthearted note. Séamus, thank you so much, folks. Check out Séamus's newsletter, Séamus-Malekafzali.com. You can also Subscribe to American Prestige, of course, and subscribe to my newsletter, foreignexchanges.news, and Danny's newsletter. He's not here, but I'll put a plug in for it anyway. Imperialist Realism. It's on Substack. So look for all of those. Subscribe to all of them. Be generous. And thanks for watching the stream. And thanks, Séamus, for doing it. And we'll see you guys again next week.
See you, folks.